My name's Luca, 19, too old to still be getting in trouble, too young to know how to stop. It was supposed to be a lazy summer. Work a little, drink a lot, flirt a little more. And staying with Uncle Mason, my mom's younger brother, the black sheep of the family, was just supposed to be a pit stop, a safe house from the disasters I kept making back home. Mason was different. 32, built like he fought the world every day and usually won. Tattoos climbing up his arms, a beard always one day past respectable, and eyes that pinned you where you stood. He wasn't like the other adults in my life who looked at me like a kid fumbling toward disaster. He looked at me like he saw something. Or maybe that's what I wanted to believe. Christ, Luca. You're nothing but trouble, Mason said, tossing me a beer one night like I was just another guy at the bar, not his nephew. His grin was wicked. I caught the bottle, smirking back, feeling older than 19 under his heavy gaze. It started with jokes. Bet you still can't beat me at pool, he'd tease, racking the balls with lazy precision. Bet you're just scared of losing to someone half your age, I'd throw back, shameless. Words. Stupid, harmless words, covering up a crackling tension that neither of us had the guts to name yet. The nights stretched long. Some beer, some bad TV, and a couch way too small for two guys who refused to admit when they were falling asleep. One night, Mason pulled out a deck of cards. Strip poker, he said, grinning, half a dare in his voice. Yeah? You scared to lose? I said, heart hammering even as I laughed. It was a joke. It was always a joke. It had to be. We played for hours, the game escalating fast, laughter spilling out of us like a secret we didn't know how to keep. At one point, stripped to just my boxers, I leaned over to grab a card and brushed against his bare thigh. I felt the way he stiffened, the way the air sharpened between us. I froze, card in hand, meeting his eyes. Something passed there. A flicker, hot and reckless. He looked away first, clearing his throat, tossing his hand of cards onto the coffee table. You win, he said, voice rougher than before. Happy? I didn't feel happy. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down, wondering how the hell I got here. Was just a joke, I said, too quickly. Yeah, Mason said, but he didn't smile. Just a joke. The next few days were worse. Or better. I don't know. He started lingering when we talked, his shoulder brushing mine when it didn't have to. His laughter was softer, slower, his stares longer. And when I caught him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, it wasn't playful anymore. It was hungry. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was lonely, bored, reading too much into everything. Until the night everything changed. We were watching some dumb movie, something neither of us cared about. The room was dark, just the flickering TV lighting his face. I stretched out on the couch, legs thrown over his lap without thinking, because that's what we did, right? We joked. We pushed boundaries. We didn't mean anything by it. But Mason didn't shove me off. He didn't laugh it off. His hand landed on my ankle, heavy, deliberate. He rubbed slow circles against my skin with his thumb, like he didn't even realize he was doing it. I felt my whole body lock up. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And Mason didn't stop. The credits rolled. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt thick, electric. Finally, slowly, Mason shifted under me. He leaned down, his face close enough I could smell the beer on his breath, the faint spice of his aftershave. His lips brushed my ankle. Soft. A barely there kiss. I jerked back like I'd been burned, heart slamming so hard it hurt. Mason looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't look away. Neither did I. The air crackled between us, an invisible tether pulling tight, taut, unbreakable. His hand hovered, hesitated, then slid up my calf with agonizing slowness. Luca, he said, voice wrecked and low, like he was begging for something without even knowing it. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe both of us. Maybe neither. But suddenly we were too close, breath mingling, foreheads almost touching. A single centimeter, and we would have crossed a line you don't come back from. My chest heaved. I could smell the panic on my own skin, the need. Mason's hand cupped the side of my face, rough palm, shaking fingers. I thought he would kiss me. I thought I would let him. Instead, he cursed under his breath and shoved himself up off the couch, pacing away like he'd been shot. "This is wrong," he muttered, scrubbing a hand down his face. You should go to bed." I couldn't find my voice. My whole body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. I stumbled to my feet, grabbing my hoodie off the back of the chair like it could somehow shield me from what almost happened. From what almost still could. As I slipped down the hall toward the guest room, I caught one last glimpse of him. Mason stood there, fists clenched, back rigid, head bowed like he was fighting a war he already knew he'd lose. And for the first time, deep in my gut, I realized something bone-deep and terrifying. This was never a joke. Not for him. Not for me. And definitely not anymore. I tried to tell myself it would fade. That the crackling heat between Mason and me was a one-time mistake, the product of too much beer, too much boredom, too many crossed wires. I avoided him for 2 days, slipping out early, coming back late, pretending the thin walls of the house didn't carry every sound of him moving, breathing, existing. But pretending only works if both people want it to. And Mason wasn't pretending anymore. I caught him watching me in the kitchen, his gaze dragging over my body like it physically hurt him to look. When I'd turn to face him, he'd snap his head away, jaw locked so tight I thought he'd break his teeth. He wasn't the only one breaking. The distance between us thickened, tightened, pulled until it felt like a noose. Every accidental touch, every accidental glance made the pressure worse. It was unbearable. And it exploded one night when I came home late, a little drunk, buzzing from a party. Mason was sitting on the porch, smoking, the orange ember of his cigarette pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. "You have fun?" he asked, voice flat. I shrugged, swaying slightly on my feet. "Yeah. Met some people. Danced. Got a number." Mason's mouth twisted like he'd swallowed something sour. "A guy." I laughed, tossing my keys onto the porch swing. "Does it matter?" His eyes glittered in the low light, dangerous. "You're staying under my roof." "It matters." I blinked, the words slicing sharper than they should have. "Since when do you care who I mess around with?" The silence stretched too long. "Since you started acting like what we did the other night meant nothing." My breath caught. I hadn't expected him to say it, to name it. But now that it was out there, a jagged thing between us, there was no stuffing it back down. "It didn't mean nothing," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Mason crushed the cigarette under his boot and stood, stepping into my space like a storm about to break. "You think I don't see it?" he said, voice low and ragged. "You think I don't feel it every damn time you walk into a room?" His hand came up, hovering near my face, trembling like he was barely holding himself together. "You're the only thing I can think about," he said. "The only thing I want." The world narrowed to just him, just me, just the shattering truth between us. I didn't move. I couldn't. Mason closed the final inch, his lips brushing mine, tentative, testing, and when I didn't pull away, he pressed harder, mouth slanting over mine with a hunger that ripped the breath from my lungs. It was desperate. It was wrong. It was everything. I fisted his shirt, yanking him closer, drowning in the feel of him. Hot, solid, real. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me against him, fitting our bodies together like two halves that should never have been carved apart in the first place. When he pulled back, we were both panting, foreheads pressed together. "We can't," he whispered, but he didn't let go. I let out a shaky laugh. "We already did." He laughed too, broken and helpless, his thumb brushing my cheek like he could memorize the shape of me before common sense tore us apart. A light flicked on in the window behind us. Mason stiffened, jerking back like I'd burned him. Shit. Mark, his boyfriend, the man who technically lived here, even if lately he was more ghost than flesh, was home. Panic spiked through me, sobering me faster than a bucket of ice water. Mason ran a hand through his hair, pacing a tight circle. "Get inside," he snapped under his breath. "Before he sees." I grabbed my keys and stumbled into the house, heart hammering so loud I barely heard Mason's footsteps behind me. Mark was standing in the kitchen, mug in hand, blinking sleepily at us. "Late night," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Yeah," Mason said, casual, easy. Like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't still tasting him on my lip. I faked a yawn, rubbing my face. "I'm dead on my feet. Gonna crash." Mark smiled faintly. "Night, kiddo." I hated that word. Hated how it twisted the knife of guilt deeper into my ribs. I bolted for the guest room, locking the door behind me like it could keep the consequences out. But they were already inside me, gnawing and growing. I collapsed onto the bed, pressing my palms over my burning face. This wasn't just flirting anymore. It wasn't jokes. It wasn't harmless. It was a wildfire, and we were both too stupid, or too desperate, to stop fanning the flames. After that night, nothing between Mason and me was safe anymore. Every look lingered too long. Every accidental touch carried electricity. Every word we spoke, no matter how casual, had a double edge that sliced deeper the longer we ignored it. Ignoring it didn't last long. The first time we crossed the final line, it wasn't under moonlight or fueled by drunken courage. It was on a stupid Tuesday afternoon, with sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, making everything look sharper, more real. Mark had left early for a work trip, 2 days away, just enough time to wreck everything beyond repair. I was standing at the sink, rinsing a glass, when Mason came up behind me, so close I could feel the heat of him along my back. "You're driving me insane," he said, low and rough against my ear. I froze, heart leaping into my throat. "Mason." He didn't let me finish. He spun me around and kissed me hard, all the desperation we'd been choking on erupting at once. His hands gripped my hips like he was afraid I'd vanish, and I clung to his shoulders, anchoring myself against the storm that was him. There was no hesitation this time. No pulling away. He lifted me onto the counter, mouth never leaving mine, devouring me like he was starving. I locked my legs around his waist, pulling him impossibly closer, both of us making these broken, guttural sounds I didn't recognize but somehow understood. When he finally tore his mouth away, he pressed his forehead to mine, breathing hard. "You sure?" he rasped. "Yes," I whispered, voice wrecked. "God, yes." We didn't make it to a bed. Clothes were shoved aside, kisses smeared along skin, nails digging into backs, teeth grazing throats. It was messy, clumsy, raw. And it was perfect. When it was over, Mason cradled my face in his hands like I was something precious, something fragile. His thumb traced my bottom lip, swollen from kissing. "I shouldn't have," he said, but his hands betrayed him, still touching, still needing. I leaned into him anyway. We stayed tangled there for what felt like hours, afraid to move, afraid to break the fragile cocoon we'd built out of stolen time and whispered apologies. But time, like guilt, has sharp teeth. By evening, the fear started creeping in. "What happens now?" I asked him, voice small, as we sat side by side on the couch, fully dressed but miles from decent. Mason stared straight ahead, jaw tight. "We don't talk about it. We don't tell anyone. We just go back to normal." Normal. Like that was even possible anymore. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. But normal didn't come. The next day we couldn't stop. It was like once the dam broke, there was no rebuilding it. Every chance we got, we found each other. Pressed against the wall in the garage, tangled up in the laundry room, panting in the dark corners of the house while Mark's voice drifted from the other room, dangerously close. It wasn't just the sex. It was the way Mason touched me when no one was looking, the way his fingers brushed mine under the table, the way he tugged me closer on the couch when Mark dozed off during a movie. It was the way he looked at me like I was the only thing that made sense in a world falling apart. But reality has a way of clawing back in. Mark wasn't stupid. He started noticing the late nights, the sudden tension. He started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. "You two getting along all right?" he asked one night, a faint edge to his voice. "Yeah," I said too quickly. Mason shot me a look over the top of his beer bottle, a warning, a plea. Mark smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said. "Would hate to think you were keeping secrets." I swallowed hard, my skin going cold. Later, in the dead of night, Mason came to my room, slipping under the sheets like a ghost. He kissed me slow, deep, like he was trying to memorize me. "You're mine," he murmured against my lips. "No matter what happens." It should have thrilled me. Instead, it scared the hell out of me. Because no matter what sounded a lot like when everything goes to hell. And somewhere deep down, I knew, we weren't just stealing moments anymore. We were building a bomb. And it was only a matter of time before it blew up in our faces. It didn't end with a bang. It ended with a door swinging open at the wrong moment. Mark had gone out to run errands. At least, that's what we thought. Long enough, we figured. Long enough to steal another hour. Mason pulled me into his bedroom this time, reckless and greedy. Clothes half off, mouths locked, bodies tangled in ways that made promises we had no right making. We didn't hear the front door. We didn't hear the footsteps, but we sure as hell heard the gasp. Mark stood frozen in the doorway, keys dangling from his fingers, disbelief carving deep lines into his face. Mason jerked back like he'd been slapped, scrambling to pull up his jeans. I stumbled off the bed, heart slamming into my ribs so hard I thought it would break through skin. For a second, none of us moved. Then Mark's face shifted, from confusion to horror to rage. "You," he choked out, voice splintering. "You fucking bastards." "Mark," Mason started, reaching out. "Don't touch me," Mark bellowed, flinching back like Mason's hand was a weapon. I felt like I was watching something sacred burn right in front of me, and the worst part was, I'd struck the match. Mark's gaze slammed into mine. Betrayal. Disgust. Hurt. "You," he spat. "You're a fucking kid. I let you into my house. I trusted you." I opened my mouth, but no words came. There was no excuse. No defense. Mason ran a shaking hand through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, pathetic and broken. Mark laughed, sharp and humorless. "Yeah? Guess what? It did." He turned and stormed down the hallway. Mason moved to follow him, but I grabbed his arm without thinking. "Don't," I whispered. "Just let him go." Mason stared at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of getting caught. Fear of losing everything. The front door slammed so hard the whole house shook. Silence swallowed us whole. Mason sagged against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor, head in his hands. I stood there, arms wrapped around myself, feeling 14 again, feeling worthless, feeling like I'd just destroyed the only thing that ever felt almost right. "I'll leave," I said finally, voice hoarse. "I'll pack my shit and go." Mason looked up, his face wrecked. "No. Stay." I shook my head. "We can't come back from this." He pushed himself to his feet, crossing the room in 2 strides, grabbing my face between his hands. "Listen to me," he said, urgent, desperate. "I don't regret you. Not for a second." Tears burned the back of my throat. "Even if it cost you everything?" "Especially then," he said, and kissed me like a dying man clinging to his last breath. It hurt, how much I wanted to believe him. It hurt worse knowing I couldn't. I pulled away first, hating myself, hating him, hating how easy it would be to stay. "I can't," I said, voice breaking. Mason's hands dropped to his sides, defeated. I turned away before I could crumble. Packing didn't take long. I hadn't brought much. Just a duffel bag full of mistakes and memories I couldn't stuff deep enough to forget. When I slung the bag over my shoulder, Mason was still standing in the hallway, looking like a man who'd lost a war he hadn't known he was fighting until it was too late. "Luca," he said, voice wrecked. I didn't look at him. "If you leave," he said, "I'll never forgive myself." I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced my legs to move. At the door, I hesitated. Maybe in another life, in another world, we could have had something real. Something good. But not this life. Not this world. In this one, we were the villains in someone else's story. I opened the door. Bright sunlight spilled into the house, blinding. I stepped into it anyway. And I didn't look back.